Baruchim Abayim, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beth Gavriel Community Center, where tonight Chazaq is once again honored and privileged to host Rabbi Yitzchok Fingerer. Before we begin tonight's event, just a few quick and important announcements regarding upcoming events and programs. First of all, every night for the men, we have a learning program, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Classes in Hebrew, English, and Russian. The many different topics. We really encourage you to come. That's 8:30 to 10 p.m. 8:15 is Ma'ariv. Also at 10 o'clock is Ma'ariv. Please come, spread the word. Wednesday nights we have Rabbi Lavian, who gives a special class on the Parsha, and we have a few other Rabbanim that do Gemara, Musar, and various other topics. If for whatever reason you can't come at nights, or if you could come at nights and you could come in the mornings, we have a morning learning program that we're involved with. It's called the Agra de Pirka Morning Kola. It's in Rabbi Avrohom Shul in Kew Garden Hills. The program there starts at 9:30 a.m. till about 11:30 a.m. There's two classes, one upstairs and downstairs. It's different levels. It's very interesting. I actually go there every morning. We encourage everyone to be there. There is breakfast served. That's in Rabbi Avrohom Shul. Rabbi Savitsky, Rabbi Gladstein, Rabbi Ilan Meirov, Rabbi Obam himself actually tomorrow will be giving a shir. Rav Noach Isaac Obam will be giving a shir tomorrow. Ladies are actually also welcome. That's going to be at 10:30 a.m. in his shul. The topic is inviting non-religious members for the Yom Tov Suda. So that's tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. We encourage everyone to come. That's in Rabbi Avrohom Shul in the Kew Garden Hills. You'll see the ad on page 6 of the newsletters, where the Chazaq Parsha papers that everyone has in front of them. Tomorrow night for the ladies, every Monday night I should say for the ladies, we have a class. Tomorrow we have Rabbi Chaya Malka Abramson, who's the author of Who by Fire. She's an inspirational speaker and the founder of the Chaya Malka Burn Foundation, raising funds for burn victims. I know that the rabbi just mentioned to me that unfortunately there was a small fire in his house, but Baruch Hashem, everyone's good. So she will be talking about triumph of spirit. Basically, Chaya Malka vividly relates the powerful story of Egad's explosion and fire in her home in the old city of Jerusalem, the details of her escape and rescue of her 3 children and grandchildren. That's an amazing story. That will be tomorrow night. For the ladies, obviously, in the back room, refreshments will be served. So tonight is Sunday, tomorrow is Monday. Tuesday, Chazaq will be involved with a major event in the Queens community. Together with Yad La'achim, we are going to be bringing in Harav Yechiel Abuchatzera, who is part of the Abuchatzera dynasty, the family, the Babasali, who will be coming in all the way from Eretz Yisrael. That will be in Yeshiva Ol Simcha Rabbi Yigal Chaimov Shul. I don't know, for some reason they put my picture and they wrote that opening remarks will be given by me. I don't know why that's a whole chidush. But Rabbi David Goldwasser also will be coming and giving some words of inspiration. That's this Tuesday. The rabbi will be available to advise and offer personal blessings for Shidduchim, Shalom Bayit, Parnasa, children, for Shlema, and all individual matters in urgent need of Yeshua. So we encourage everyone to come. That's this Tuesday, in 2 days from now. Next Sunday, a week from tonight, Chazaq will be hosting a special event once again with this time Rabbi Eliyahu Bergstein. That will be a week from tonight. A lot going on, Baruch Hashem. You see, Chazaq is not sleeping. I heard a beautiful pshat, Dvar Torah from Rabbi Obam this morning. We had a Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky here, the Rosh Yeshiva from Philadelphia. He came all the way to check out the community. And he said that the Panovich Rebbe, I believe it was the Panovich Rebbe, used to say that it is a very good thing to dream. But he says it's good to dream as long as you're not sleeping. You have to constantly, you have to be awake, you have to dream big, you have to do great things. So Baruch Hashem, Chazaq is really trying our best to do as much as possible in the community. So basically a week from tonight we're going to be having Rabbi Eliyahu Bergstein on the topic of Shabbat, how high can it take us? So that's a week from tonight. We encourage everyone to come. Sushi will be served at 8 p.m. With regards to other Chazaq events and programs, I could go on and on. I do want to stress that we started something new, which is called the Chazaq Radio. Baruch Hashem, it's a very big success already, and it's just in its beginning stages. We encourage everyone to visit ChazaqRadio.com, CHAZAQ Radio.com. Please spread the word to your friends and family members. Throughout the day, as of right now, we have regular music. Actually, not regular music, great music. Very, very, very good music. A lot of work went into putting this together. At a regular basis, we have dozens and hundreds of listeners, and prime time we have thousands even. So Thursday nights until June 1st, we have shows. We have a kashrus show. We have a rabbi doing a parsha show. We have someone doing a legal show. We have a doing the right thing show. Basically, it's different questions and answers. What's the right thing to do? Very interesting, very informative, and Baruch Hashem, it's going very well. Starting June 1st, Emerita Hashem, we're going to be having daily shows, which will include news. That means you don't have to go to the secular sources to hear your news. You can come to Chazaq Radio. And our goals with this is as follows: that not only should it be online, but it should also be on air throughout New York City. So we're working on getting a station. We need anyone that has any connections to getting on air. I was thinking about something like 613 FM, 613, Chicken 13 Mitzvot. But whatever we could get, I'll be very happy with, so we can reach the masses. Aside from Chazaq Radio, the goal is to turn it into a Chazaq TV, where we'll be able to have about 24-hour programming via videos. We could have shows for the kids, a kids hour. We could have women, recipes and cooking. Have different chefs. We'll teach the women how to cook, chillent and kugel or osavo and oshpalo, whatever it's called. So I think people will really benefit from that. So that's ChazaqRadio.com. The new Chazaq magazine came out. You'll see a few copies over there at the entrance. Please feel free to grab one. And whoever wants to sponsor future events and lectures, please come and see me. With that being said, it is my honor to call upon my very good friend, the author of Search Judaism and a few other Sfarim and books, the founder and director and operations manager, the person behind Brooklyn Jewish Experience, right? And it's my honor to call upon Rabbi Yitzchok Fingerer, who will be speaking about achieving greatness in your life. Round of applause, please.
I want to thank Rabbi Yaniv and Rabbi Ilan for creating such a dynamic and vibrant organization of Chazaq. I'm your biggest fan. And I wish you, B'ez Hashem, only continued success. You should go mechayil l'chayil, from strength to strength, in your tremendous avodas hakodesh on behalf of the tzibur. Also want to thank another organization that does phenomenal work, Torah Anytime. Torah Anytime is just a wonderful organization. Again, I'm their biggest fan. They do such wonderful work, and I believe that they're reaching now 5 million hours of Torah learning a year, which is probably unparalleled. And it's something that's awe-inspiring. And I was told to announce that there's a new option in the app called Follow Me, where if your favorite speaker gives a new presentation or a shiur, lecture or class, you could click on that, and then you get an updated notice when they're speaking the next time. Okay, that was my little introduction. Are you tired of being average, run-of-the-mill, mediocre, resting on your laurels and stagnating? Don't you want to be great? Of course you want to be great. So how do you achieve greatness? How do you rise to the top and ascend to the apex and climb to the summit of majesty of greatness? And what is greatness, and how do we achieve it? How do we reach it? So I want to share with you, there was a woman who, she was in her 70s, not that old. She was crossing Main Street, and very tragically, very unfortunately, in the prime of her life, she was an active grandmother, a wonderful lady. She was struck by a vehicle, and she was sent immediately to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead. And she ascends to the heavens, and she says to God, she says, I don't understand. It's too premature. It's too early. I have so much more to accomplish. I don't want to die. And God said, you know what? You're right. I'll give you another 20 years. She says, really? It was that easy? He says, yeah, go back. She goes back and she says, I have a new lease on life. This is wonderful. So she never liked her nose. She gets a nose job. She never liked her face. She gets a facial. She starts getting Botox. And she gets a facelift. And she gets liposuction. And she looks great. And then she's crossing Main Street again the next week and bang! She's hit again by another car. And she goes up there, she's dead. And she says, God, I don't understand. You told me I get another 20 years. He said, it's you? I didn't recognize you. How do we change? Let's talk about change. So I think in order to understand how we could achieve greatness and how we could really climb the ladder to success in life and change and become who we want to be, we have to look at Maseches Avos. Maseches Avos is Ethics of the Fathers. Maseches Avos was really comprised of 5 parakim, 5 chapters. The 6th chapter that we're going to learn this Shabbos, this week, is really just an addendum. It's not the actual Pirkei Avos. It was added later on, more ancillary to the actual Pirkei Avos. Because actual Pirkei Avos is only comprised of 5 chapters. The 6th was Brisus that was added in anticipation of Shavuos, which was Kinyan HaTorah, how to acquire Torah scholarship and Torah learning. But really there's in essence 5 chapters. Avos is a repository of wisdom that's Torah Shebaal Peh, that comes from Sinai. The adages, the maxims, the phraseology, the Chachma Elyoina, the supernal, supreme wisdom of our sages on how to conduct, how to live a good, healthy, wholesome, happy, fulfilling life. So let me ask you a question. Don't you think that in Avos, in the very end would be encapsulated the greatest wisdom? Because of course in life you have the penultimate and then you have the ultimate, the culmination, when it comes to fruition. And the very end of Avos, you would think, would be the message. And whoever is delivering the message is the messenger, the great communicator, the greatest of the greats. And yet, when we look at the end of Avos, the end of Parakeh, who is delivering the message? None other than Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey. It sounds like a joke. Hey. What does this mean? Ben Bagbag, Ben Hey, Ben Bagbag Omer, Hafachba v'Hafachba Dukului Ba. Turn over the Torah. Plumb the depths of Torah because everything is contained in the Torah. As the Zohar says, there's nothing that's not encoded or encrypted in the Torah Kedosha. That's Ben Bagbag's message. And he continues. Ben Hey says, Lefum Sar Agra, as Babe Ruth famously plagiarized from Mishnah and Avos, no pain, no gain. Lefum Sar Agra, according to the effort is the reward, according to the pain is Agra, is the payback, is the payment, is the reward. That's Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey, delivering the ultimate message, and this is how Avos is concluded. It's a letdown, maybe. It's not a letdown. Who was Ben Bagbag and who was Ben Hey? They must have been so renowned, they must have been so prestigious, they must have been such great scholars and so pious, such tzaddikim, if they are the ones to deliver the final message. But who are they? Is Ben Bagbag the Tana in the Gemara Kedushin of Yudam Abayz, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Bagbag? Or perhaps they are similar to Ben Azai and Ben Zayma, who are mentioned repeatedly in the Talmud, in the Gemara. But the appellation Ben Azai and Ben Zayma, their true names, are disguised and concealed. And the Rishonim point out that their real names were Shimon Ben Azai, Shimon Ben Zayma. But they were called Ben Azai and Zayma because they were young. Some say that they died young. And they weren't musmachim, they weren't ordained. And that's why they were known by their fathers' names. And some suggest the same with Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey. But the Rashbam, Shmuel Ben Meir, brings down B'Shem Hari Ben Arash, a fascinating approach to who the identities of Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey are. And he says that Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey, one approach and one opinion is that they were Gerim, they were converts. And they were fleeing Roman persecution because of their conversion. And therefore these names were sort of pseudonyms or nom de plumes so that they wouldn't be found by the Romans that were persecuting them. But he says they were converts, and there's an opinion that says, and this is absolutely intriguing, that the reason why they were given the name Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey is because they were the spiritual descendants of Avraham and Sarah, the first converts in the world, the first subscribers to monotheism that actually spread monotheism in the world. And Sarah and Avraham, they had names before Sarah and Avraham. Their original names were Sarai and Avram. Sarai became Sarah, she got a hey to her name, and Avram became Avraham, he gets a hey to his name. Similarly, whoever Ben Bagbag and Hey were, their nature as converts is alluded to in the fact that they became Hays. Because just like Sarai becomes Sarah and Avram becomes Abraham, and Hays are added to their names, but whoever Ben Hey was, he becomes Hey as a throwback to Sarah and Abraham, the two Hays. And Ben Bagbag would have also been called Ben Hey. But in order to distinguish and differentiate, in order to understand that there were two identities and two individuals and two personalities, therefore, he couldn't have also been Ben Hey for the Hey Abraham and the Hey of Sarah. And therefore he's known as Ben Bagbag because Ben Bagbag, Bag is Beis Gimel, and the Beis is a 2 and the Gimel's a 3, that's 5. So Bag is really Hey, and the next Bag is also Hey. It's 5 and 5, Hey and Hey, for the Hey of Sarah and the Hey of Avraham. And the Tosas Yontif says, if I'm not mistaken, that these two individuals, these two great tzaddikim, these two great Tanoim, were the Av HaGerim, were the fathers of Gerim, which is a little complicated to make such a statement. Because while it may be true that there was more of a prevalence and predominance of converts in the world then than Baalei Tshuva, than people that grew up Jewish but secular and changed around their lives, because most of the people were probably observant at that time, but to say that they were father of converts is challenging. Because if you look at Perek Aleph of Pirkei Avos, where it lists the Zugos in the very beginning, the special pairs of Tanoim, the 9th, if I'm not mistaken, entry is of Shemaiah and Avitalion. And Avitalion, says the Bartanura, means Avitalion is Aramaic for Ketanim, for small, for children, because he was the Av Talion, he was the father of orphaned children. He was also the Av Sanhedrin, the Av Bezdin. But the Bartanura says that they were converts to Judaism. And they were descendants of Sancherev. Sancherev was a nefarious and notorious wicked Russia who tried to destroy the Jewish people, the Melech Ashur, the king of Assyria, who eventually was succeeded and vanquished by Babylonia. But he predated Babylonia in his attempted subjugation of the Jewish people. And he laid siege to Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh in the time of Chizkiyo, HaMelech Hezekiah, and Yeshayahu, and Navi Isaiah. And as it's recorded in Melachim Beis, the Jewish people were panic-stricken. After all, the great Assyrian army, Sancherev was a world conqueror. He was a very dangerous man, a megalomaniac. And his intention was utter destruction and genocide. And the Jewish people were beside themselves in worry. And Rabban Shalom, the Master of the Universe, gives a prophecy. And he says, don't worry. He says, they will be destroyed as they lay siege to your hometown, to the holy city of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. The Kachava, and this is what happens. In the middle of the night, the greatest army in the world, you're talking about stellar generals, 185,000 troops or generals, according to some opinions, were smote with a plague, a Magefa, a Makeh, and suddenly drop dead and die. And the Jewish people, of course, Baruch Hashem, a miracle occurs for them. The interesting thing is that when Sancherev retreats and flees back to his capital city of Nineveh, he goes to his idol, to his Avodah Zarah, to beseech and implore the Avodah Zarah, and to ask that he be recouped his losses and the humiliation and shame that he encountered, And he made a promise, a solemn oath and vow, and he said, whatever is most precious to me, I will give to you if I am victorious. And his 2 sons heard this, Adramelech and Sarezer, 2 sons of Sancherib. And obviously they had very healthy sense of self-esteem. It was good that these children had healthy senses of. They hear the father saying, whatever is most precious to me, I will deliver to you. They said, he must be talking about us. Who does he love more than us? It's good for children to feel like that. Well, but in this situation, they went ahead and they figured they'll have to kill their father before he kills them and sacrifices them to the altar, as was very prevalent, human sacrifice. And that's how Sancherib met his bitter end. Let me ask you a question. The fact is that this miracle, a great, great miracle, is attested and corroborated by Herodotus and Josephus and many secular historians, and even today, the past 10 years, archaeological research has demonstrated very conclusively and definitively that Hezekiah's tunnel, Chizkiyahu HaMelech's tunnel in Yerushalayim, and everything that was recorded in Malachim is accurate. But why would Shmayin of Italian, the great Tanoim, Kedoshim, Elyonim, the great holy ones, the righteous ones, the pious, devout ones, why would they descend from Sancherib? Why should Sancherib have such a schus? And I would think that, you know what? An unprecedented miracle occurred on the account of Sancherib. 185,000 troops, would you hear such a thing, just die instantaneously, unattributed. You could do a post-mortem autopsy, they wouldn't find, there was no reason for it. Obviously it was a miracle. And the fact is of course, it was correlated with the fact that there was a prophecy delivered that they would die. Such a miracle? No stone goes unturned, megaglin schus hayidei zakai. Every person is rewarded, even if he does it unintentionally. He's rewarded for the positive outcome of the tshuva that results because the people are inspired. That's why the Gemara says elsewhere, the bnei banav shel Haman, even Haman, the evil Haman, his children, either there's a girsa lamdu Torah or limdu Torah bnei Brak, where they learned or they actually even were disseminators, teachers of Torah in Bnei Brak, because Haman, again, there was such a colossal, monumental tshuva amongst the Jewish people. Never before occurred because of Haman's actions. Therefore, he had to be rewarded. But let's go back. Were they the first Gerim? Were they not the first Gerim? I don't know. But what's the lesson to be learned here? Why in the world would God allow that Maseches Avos should conclude with the authors, Ben Bagbar, Ben Heihei, who were Gerim, who were converts to Judaism? What is a lesson here? And I think it's such a beautiful lesson to teach us how to ascend to greatness. Because God is saying, if you want to understand what life is all about, it's not to be from birth, called FFB, but from by choice, FBC. I'm not even referring to the endemic situation of people observing Yiddishkeit Judaism through rote and habit. I'm talking about the issue where we don't think about why we're doing things. And we don't make a conscious decision to why I'm observing Yiddishkeit in Judaism. Am I from by choice or am I from birth? From by birth, FBB or FBC? Comes along the Torah Kedosha. Ben Bagbag Ben Heihei. And Parakeh begins with the fact that there were 20 generations where God was infuriated, irate with his people, with his handiwork, with humanity. And he says, what a dismal failure all you people are. From Adam to Noach, decadence, immorality, travesty, catastrophe. Noach to Avraham, a bleak, dismal reality, corruption, debauchery, everything wrong. Comes along Avraham Avinu, and it says, Kibel Schar Kulam. Avraham Avinu rectifies and redeems everybody. He's the greatest. He's the best. Rashi says, why? Because Nefesh Asher Asu B'chorim. Because Avraham Avinu was the first one to make a conscious effort to change humanity, to change the world, to help convert people, to proselytize people, to make people understand you don't have to rest on your laurels. You don't have to stagnate. You don't have to be average. You don't have to be run-of-the-mill. You don't have to be mediocre. You could be great. You could be amazing. You could be at the top of the world. And when did Avram start this? Avram started this, according to the Rishonim, when he was 52 years old. Listen to this. Avraham Avinu was born in 1948, not the secular year, the 1948 of creation. 1948 plus 52 is the year 2000. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Gimel says, do you remember Y2K, everybody? Each and every one of us in this room. I know you want to pretend to be young, but nobody's that young here in this room. Everybody's over 14 years old. You all remember Y2K. Who was panicking Y2K? Who went ahead and built a subterranean tunnel in their house and went ahead and went to Keyfood and went to Target and bought out the store and bought batteries? All right, now everybody's embarrassed to admit it. Okay, I'll raise my hand. I did it, okay? All right, the world was going to end at Y2K. Well, the original Y2K of the world was the year 2000. According to the Megillah and Avodah Zarah, the Gemara there, from 0 to 2000 were the years of Toyu, oblivion. Were the years of desolation, of emptiness, of void. It was vacuous, the world, empty of spirituality. But from the years 2000 to 4000 were the years of Torah scholarship, Torah learning. And the year that Avraham Avinu started sharing the message of monotheism and Judaism with the world was precisely the year 2000, 1948 plus 52, when he's 52 years old. And how did Torah start in the world? Not with Panovich, not with Brisk, not with Lakewood, not with Mir. Torah started with converts. Torah started with Bali Tshuva, with people that changed around their lives, because that's what God wants to see. He doesn't want to see people immaculate conception born out of holiness. He doesn't want to see fakery. He wants to see the genuine, sincere conviction of people that struggled, of the Ben Bagbag and Ben Hey, who worked hard. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Mem Ches, says that converts have Yisurin, Ma'onin Yisurin. They feel persecuted, sometimes they feel afflicted. And the Gemara wants to know why they suffer. Gerid Tzedek, righteous converts. And the Gemara gives 4 opinions. The first Tana is Rabbi Hananya. Rabbi Hananya says that the reason why converts suffer is because of what they did in their past lives. B'giyus on it when they were Gentiles. They didn't observe perhaps the 7 laws of Noach, the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, and therefore they have to suffer now. That's Rabbi Hananya. That's why they suffer as Jewish people, as converts. Rabbi Yossi, though, gives a different opinion. Rabbi Yossi says that's not the reason why they suffer, because they cannot be punished based on previous lives. After all, the Gemara says, Gersh and Iskayer, Kekatan Shnolidami. The Christian movement, the Southern Baptists, have something called a born again. All right, you go to the Bible Belt, everybody's born again. The Jewish people were the first one to come up with that concept, where if you undergo conversion, you are born again. Gersh and Iskayer, Kekatan Shnolidami. So Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi Hananya, I'm sorry, wrong shita, doesn't make sense. He says, so why do Gerim suffer in this world? He says, because they ain't in Bekiyan, they're not proficient in the mitzvos, they're newbies at it, they're freshmen at it, they have to start learning the ropes, and they make mistakes, and that's why they suffer. Ask the Aruch LaNer, the great Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, a fascinating question. He says, Rabbi Hananya doesn't agree with this. The fact that a convert is a renewal, is a newborn entity. How could he argue? After all, it's Yerushalmi and Bikurim. Perak Gimel, Halacha Mem Gimel says that there are 3 individuals in this world. They have clean slates, tabula rosa. Everything that they've done in their lives is cleaned away. They're reborn anew. Who are these 3 people? A convert, a chassan, a groom, and a chacham, somebody that gets a good shtella, all right, a 6-figure salary, no Baal Batim to bother him. We can learn all day. It doesn't exist, right? Such a chacham, he's also Marchalai al-Kovin Hussein. So it's interesting. These 3 people get a free pass. It's Yerushalmi. Right? As a matter of fact, it's interesting because there's a Ravon that says something very interesting. He says if a guy converts to Judaism, living in Eretz Yisrael, so since he's a newborn baby, he's a newborn child, he has to follow the rulings of Maran, of the Mechaber, because he has no progenitors, he has no ancestors, he has no lineage, and therefore, since he was born in Eretz Yisrael, he has to subscribe to the Shitas of Mechaber. There's actually interesting Yad Shoel in Shulchan Aruch, Yoredei Reish Mem Daled, where he says that we normally have a halacha that says that if somebody's elderly, you have to rise for that person. I know certain people, when they go on the bus, in order to get discounts, they pretend, to be, I'm a senior citizen, right? And then there are senior citizens that refuse to take the discount because they don't want to be considered to be old. So they fight, no, I have to pay full fare, I'm not old. Well, for the halachas, you have to stand up for an elderly person. How old is that person? Most poskim say the person is 70 years and older. According to the Yad Shol, if somebody converts and the person can be 89 years old or 90 years old, if they convert when they're 90 years old, you do not have to stand up for that person because the person is a newborn child. It's funny, it makes it sound like the person can't go to a geriatric doctor. You got to send the person, 89-year-old, to a pediatrician and give them teething, and diapers, it sounds funny. We don't paskin like that. As a matter of fact, there's a Shal Shuvas Lachmei Toida that says that the halacha is that a person is allowed to be punished by a earthly court for doing an infraction, for doing a transgression or violating a prohibition of the Torah. So he's punished by an earthly court at 13 years old. But let's say nobody saw. The guy he thought he was lucky because there were no witnesses. But Shemayim sees everything. Shemayim, though, the heavenly tribunal, the heavenly court, does not punish until a person is 20 years old. Says the Shal Shuvas Lachmei Toida, when it comes to somebody who's a convert or a chassan or a chacham who gets a nice position, until 20 years pass, they're off the hook. Because Shemayim doesn't judge until they're 20 years old. They're considered to be newborns. Don't tell this to any newly married couples, especially the guys. They think that the first 20 years they're allowed to get away with anything they want. Don't share this information. You didn't hear it from me, okay? So then I'll have a lot of naksama, more than I can handle, okay? So the Aruch LaNer asks a question. He says, what does Rabbi Hananya do with this? Rabbi Hananya, again, was of the opinion that the reason why Gerim suffer in this world is because they're punished for what they did as Bigiyusin in their Gentile stage. But they're newborns. Says the Aruch LaNer, according to Rabbi Hananya, they're Gilgulim. They're like reincarnated souls. And yes, they're reborn, but they still have to recompense. They still have to pay back and compensate for what they did in their previous incarnation, in their previous lives. Rabbi Yossi, on the other hand, holds that there's not a Gilgul over here. It's actually a creation ex nihilo. It's a creation of a new entity from scratch. No past. And then there's a third opinion. Very, very, very kedai to discuss the third opinion, Abba Chanan. And Abba Chanan says the reason why Gerim suffer in this world is because a Ger acts out of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder sometimes. It's not only Gerim. It's us from people as well, born into Judaism, that sometimes the reason why we do a mitzvah is because of neurosis, is because we're afraid. Oh, I don't want to go to Gehenna. Are you afraid of hell? Christian hell and the Jewish hell, very, very different. I don't want to go to Gehenna. I don't want anything to happen to me. Oy, my milcha gadish. Oy, what happened? Pesach, chametz. You're not doing it out of love. You're not doing it because you revere the Eibishter. You're not doing it because the Pashever, because God in heaven is somebody that's majestic, somebody grand, amazing. You're doing it because you have fear out of Yira. That's not good. Not good. And therefore, the Ger suffers because of that, according to Abba Chanan. Because you got to do things out of love, because you're awestruck from God, from the Almighty. That then comes along the fourth and last opinion, that's Acherim. And Acherim says, you know why they suffer in this world? And this is so beautiful. This is so poignant and salient. You know why they suffer? They suffer because they didn't convert sooner. They procrastinated. It was a protracted experience. And as soon as they had that burst of inspiration, where they said, this is the objective, definitive, conclusive, ironclad, this is it, they should have immediately converted. But they waited a week, a month, 2 months, a year. You know, we can relate to that. Everybody in this room can. Everybody listening, everybody viewing this can. You get inspiration, you listen to a shiur, you listen to a Dvar Torah, you read a book that's inspirational, and you say, wow, I'm going to change, I'm going to be better, I'm going to be different. But not now. Tomorrow. Next week. Next year. I go to a life coach, I go to a psychologist to give me a good idea. Oh, well, I go to a parent for advice, I go to a sibling for advice, and they give me good advice. I go here, I go there. No. and you lose the momentum. Instead of being galvanized, instead of catapulting yourself forward, it says, Acherim, that's why the ger punished. And that's why everybody's punished. Because mitzvah haboliyot altach mitzanim, when a mitzvah comes to your hand, don't let it ferment. Don't let it atrophy. Seize the moment. We have to have alacrity and zest and zeal and a gusto to perform mitzvahs. Don't let it ebb. So much to learn. The Arizal says something fascinating. He says that Gerim, those that change their lives around, have the highest, most sublime, supernal neshamos. And Rabbi Tzadok HaKoyen of Lublin in Pri Tzadok says that the Gerim have a very intimate, inseparable connection to Torah Sheba'al Peh in particular. Because Torah Sheba'al, the written law, the 5 books of the Torah, it's basically handed to us on a silver platter. But Torah Sheba'al Peh evolved in a certain sense because it was a transmission from Sinai itself, from God, but from teacher to student, from parent to child. But in order to understand it, in order to be a receptacle, to behold it, and to fathom it, it takes amelos, it takes work, it's arduous to sweat through it. And only somebody who's changes around the life can have such an intimate, personal connection to Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's why the Arizal says that it was Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Akiva who are really the patriarchs, the fathers of Torah Sheba'al Peh, because they were both either Gerim or from Gerim. And the Gra says that the Ger is on such a high level that while a Jew, an ordinary Jew, in order to enunciate Hashem's name, we have to first precede Hashem's name with 2 tevos, with 2 words. In order to say the word Hashem, we have to say Baruch Atah. But the Ger, Yisrael, what does he say? Baruch Hashem Esher Hitzchel Eschem. Right away, he only uses 1 teva to precede the word Hashem. He says Baruch Hashem, because he's on such a holy level. And you think about Rabbi Akiva for a moment. According to the Ramban in Sefer Shahar Gomel, which is a book on eschatology, where the Ramban speaks about the Yomais HaMashiach, L'Asalavai, fascinating hashkafa sefer written by Nachmanides Ramban. He seems to allude to the fact that Rabbi Akiva was holy his entire life. However, there's a dispute about this, there's a debate, because the Ritva and the Arizal and the Medrash and many other Shittas hold that Rabbi Akiva, the first 40 years of his life, was an Amaretz Gomor, was an ignoramus, and was a bore. And he violated the words of the Chacham and the words of the sages, and he trespassed. And yet, look how he changed around his life. Becoming the great Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara Menachos says that he exceeded Moshe Rabbeinu, the Av HaNaviim, the father of all prophets. He eclipsed Moshe Rabbeinu, the holy Moshe. But Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara in Brachos Samach Beis says that he met a very bitter end. After 120 years, he lived 120 years, 80 years of his life was spent learning Torah. After 40 years of being not religious, the Gemara in Brachos says, though, that if somebody's osip Torah, if somebody's learning Torah, they're impervious, they are immune, and they're rendered innocuous to harm. And even if the persecutors and the anti-Semites attempt to harm them, it doesn't happen. So how could it be that Rabbi Akiva, when he was learning Torah, was subject to the torture, the persecution, lacerated, awful, barbaric torture, where he screams out, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And the Nachas B'Yamin says that the reason for this was payback, because Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, was a Gilgal reincarnation of Yaakov, patriarch Jacob, Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu, even though the firstborn ancestral firstborn rights was really his because he was the Tipa Rishona, because he was the first one conceived from the mother Rivka. And really he should have received the Bechorah, but he did it in an illicit way. He did it in a way that was unethical, and it caused a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's name. And the Goyim, the Romans, for years and years alleged and insinuated that Jews are criminals, merchant events, and then as Shakespeare. He says in order to rectify that, Yaakov had to come back in the body, his soul had to come back in the body of Rabbi Kiva and suffer. Rav Shimshon from Ashtropol, he says a different idea. He says that because Yaakov married two sisters, Rachel and Leah, again, that wasn't his initial plan, it wasn't his lechatchila. It was a b'diavad. It was the post facto scenario because he was betrayed and beguiled by his very unethical father-in-law named Laban. But he did marry two sisters, which ended up being a violation of a Torah precept not to marry two sisters. Ramban says that it was okay at the time because even though the patriarchs did observe the Torah, they did not do so outside of the land of Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. They did not observe certain mitzvos. But still, it was a violation, and therefore he had to suffer, and he came back as Eov. But the Arizal says, and Arizal, I imagine, is a more definitive and authoritative source on this, because he specialized in the area of Gilgulim, and he says that if you look at the word, the letters, Akiva, is the same Osios as Yaakov. And he explains that Yaakov did a heinous thing. Yaakov perpetrated a terrible sin. Because we know that Yosef was scorned and despised and hated by his brothers. Rightfully so. His brothers thought that he was trying to usurp the role of king from Yehuda and the role of firstborn rights from Reuven. And that he was a troublemaker and an instigator and trying to instigate a coup. And therefore they hated him. They wanted to do away with him because they thought that he was causing enmity and strife and hatred. But Yaakov Avinu knew that Yosef wasn't liked by his brothers. And what does he do? He sends Yosef, the vulnerable, susceptible Yosef, the lad, into the lion's den. He says, Joseph, Yosef, I don't know where your brothers are. They're lost, perhaps. I hope they're okay. What are you worried? They're okay. There's 10 of them. Yosef, go find them. What are you doing? Says Arizal, he was punished for that. Eventually, when they're reunited after 22 years, they embrace each other, father and son, Yosef and Yaakov, and they say Shema. But it wasn't sufficient, and therefore, Yaakov has to come back. His soul is reincarnated to Rabbi Akiva's body, and he says Shema while being tortured by the Romans. There are many, many different opinions. There's another sheet that holds that the reason why the Romans were able to get him, even though he was learning Torah, was because of the 40 years that he violated precepts of Chazal. But whatever it is, according to many opinions, Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of the great of the greatest of the holiest of the holies, was not born holy, was not born infallible, had struggles, and had to persevere despite the challenges, despite the turbulence, and despite all the distractions and diversions and outside influences. And he rose to become the greatest of the greats. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes, who one of the greatest, most famous Tanoim, the sixth, if I'm not mistaken, most mentioned Tana in the Gemara, the author of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Interesting, if I'm not mistaken, the Chidah says that if you look in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, it starts Mi Yamala Gevuras Hashem, and it's a tradition brought down by the Sefer Hasidim that an author should always encrypt and encode their name in the first few words of the Sefer. And the Gemashi Mi Yamala Gevuras Hashem, if I'm not mistaken, is Eliezer ben Horkenes, to show that he was the author of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes was, the Mishnah attests about him, that he was the greatest Talmud of Yochanan and Zakkai, and that he was a Bor Such Eimana Ma'abe Tipa. He retained all of Torah, Kol Torah Kula. He was the epitome, the personification of holiness. But who was he really? You know who he was? He was a young man whose father probably accused him of being a autistic, Asperger's, learning disabled. And his father relegated him to doing menial tasks. His father was a real estate magnate, owned properties and fields, and put him to work and denied him an education. Terrible, terrible thing. Because he didn't understand his child. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinez. He didn't understand his child, Horkinez. And it's such a lesson in life to parents. You must. There's nothing more important in this world than getting to know your child or children. Spending infinite amount of time getting to know their personalities, their character traits, how to guide them, how to coach them, how to discipline them, but how to love them in the way that they need. And Horkinez made a terrible blunder. And Eliezer's soul was craving out of Teshukah, yearning for holiness, and he escaped. And he ran to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim. And he joined the academy, the yeshiva of Yochanan Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. And he ascended to such greatness that he was the head of the class. His father, in the meantime, was terribly, terribly, terribly upset. His father couldn't get over the loss of his son. And he decided that he was writing Eliezer out of the will. And he wanted to do it in the most authoritative way possible. And he decided to travel to the greatest rabbi in the entire generation, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, to make sure that it became law that his son Eliezer is expelled and evicted from his ancestry, from the will, and denied his inheritance. And he gets there. And Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai orchestrates that who should be teaching the academy on that day when all the scholars from the city were gathered together, a whole assemblage of the greatest greats. And who was teaching? Eliezer. And the father is sitting there, his mouth is agape. He can't believe it. He's stunned and shocked. And he gets up there and he says, and this is recorded in Avos to Reb Nosson, he says, I was just going to write him out of the will. Instead, I want to write all my other children out of the will and leave everything to him. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai says, you're not allowed to do that. So Eliezer ben Horkinez wasn't born to holiness, wasn't born infallible, wasn't born great, but achieved greatness through a lot of hard work and through realizing his dream and not giving up. His own teacher, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, according to many Shittas, who also lived 120 years, the first 40 years of his life was not religious. Hillel, the Gemara in Pesachim tells us that at the time of Hillel, the Ab Sanhedrin, the great rabbis were the Bnei Beseira, and they had a question related to the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. They didn't know what to do. And there's great controversy, great debate. And all of a sudden, this Babylonian Hillel comes to town. And he paskins for them, and they make him the Nasi. It shows the tremendous humility of the Bnei Beseira, how they're willing to give up their position. Something we can all learn from. Amazing. Who was Hillel? Where did he come from? Nobody knows. But the greatest lesson, I think, can be gleaned from none other than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. What was Moshe Rabbeinu? Who was he? So there are many Rishonim that say when he was born, Tovhu, he was good. He was amazing. The house radiated. It exuded, it effervesced with holiness and light because he was born circumcised gemalt. He was born perfect. But there are others that say, not so simple. As a matter of fact, there's a famous Tiferes Yisrael where he brings down a very controversial opinion and story. I'm going to recite it even though I think it's probably been disproved, although there are those that still want to entertain it, that there was a king from an alien nation, a contemporary of Moshe Rabbeinu, who heard about the great wonders that Moshe Rabbeinu facilitated on behalf of Hashem to liberate and emancipate the Jewish people from Egypt, and he was so awestruck, he says, I have to know more about this man. So he had specialists in his cabinet that knew physiognomy, that knew how to decipher the true personality of the person based on the lines in the forehead and the creases in the face. And he employed them to go find Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert. he employed special artisans and artists to go find Moshe Rabbeinu and to make an exact portrait of Moshe Rabbeinu so that his other people could decipher based on physiognomy and tell the truth about Moshe Rabbeinu. So the artists go, and they come back, and now he gives it to this team to decipher, and they look at it and they study it very intently, and they say, this man is a fraud. He's a charlatan. He's really a crook. This man, he didn't know, they weren't told who they're interpreting. It's part of the double-blind study. And they said, he's just a hobo that spends his time under a bridge, a vagrant. And the king was infuriated. He says, you're the experts. Obviously, you don't know anything. You've been playing with me the whole time. You don't know anything. And he wanted to execute, he wanted to kill them. And they said, no, we're sure. We are super proficient in this. We're super expert. This is our expertise. This is our forte. We know what we're talking about. So then he goes to the people that painted Moshe Rabbeinu, the artists, and he says, you lied to me. You betrayed me. You deceived me. How dare you? You went to some, hick town and, got me some redneck. You didn't go to Moshe Rabbeinu. They said, no, we promise you. So now, there's two contradictory verses here. Two different opinions. How do you reconcile it? And he realizes that he doesn't want to kill innocent people. He doesn't want to shed innocent blood. He has to go to the desert himself. And the story goes, this is just a legend, probably a fairy tale, but he goes to the desert and he asks eventually for an audience with Moshe Rabbeinu, and he sits him down and he says, listen, I'm torn. I'm embarrassed to tell you what they said about you. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, stop in your tracks. He says, they're both right. It's all true. My inner character traits, he says, are not good. All of the above are true. But he said, I had to work on myself and work on myself and work on myself. And that's how I became who I am. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says that Kol Ish Yisrael, every Jew, could become a Moshe Rabbeinu. Amazing. Amazing. If we put our hearts and minds to something, to grow, to change our bad midos, we could do it, says the Rambam. Even though the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu from Chatzei Milamata, from his waist down, it says he was just a regular, ordinary human being. But Chatzei Milamayla, from his waist up, it says he was Elokim. And when Moshe Rabbeinu goes to see Paro, it says, Re'ei Pnei Elok, goes, you're going to see the God. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was like God. Says the Rambam and say other Rishonim. It wasn't that he was a God from birth. That's the Christians. That's not Judaism. It's Me'avodasai, from his hard labor, from his sweat and toil, from Lefum Sar Agra, from recognizing that according to the effort is a reward, no pain, no gain. That's how he achieved becoming the greatest of the greats. And that's why the Gemara in Chulin Daf Kuf Lamed Tes is so interesting. Because the Gemara says, Moshe min HaTorah minayin. Where does Moshe Rabbeinu appear in the Torah? What kind of question is this? Asks all the Rishonim Achronim. Moshe Rabbeinu is ubiquitous. He's everywhere in the Torah, every place, every time. He's so replete, the Torah is so replete with references, explicit, and even allusions to Moshe Rabbeinu. What do you mean, where is Moshe in the Torah? If you want to speak about somebody who wants to mention the Torah Shebachsav in the 5 books, you want to ask Esther min HaTorah minayin, Haman min HaTorah minayin, as Gemara says, I can understand, but Moshe? The Chut HaMashulish says something so profound and so earth-shattering and so beautiful. You know what he says? He says the Gemara was asking, how do we know Moshe min HaTorah minayin? How do we know that he was just human, just like us? How do we know that? And the Gemara answers a pasuk from the end of Bereshis in the time of the Mabul, where the pasuk says, Lo yadin ruchi ba'adam. And the pasuk continues, B'shegam hu basar. What does that mean? According to the Sfarim, Lo yadin ruchi ba'adam. I don't want any human being to judge and think that I put my ruchi, my spirit, into a human being and made them into a god. B'shegam hu basar, because they are also flesh and blood. And the Gemara says this is an allusion to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah. The verse here and the specific words, B'shegam hu basar, because he is flesh and blood. And the pasuk continues, that's why the maximum lifespan of a human being, the mortality of a human being, the greatest longevity is 120 years. And the Chizkuni and Rabbi Sadia go and say this is an exact reference to Moshe Rabbeinu, who lived precisely 120 years and not longer, to show that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was also human. The Onklis and the Ravad Yissaforno say that the 120 years here mentioned in the Pasuk is not referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, rather it's referring to the fact that God gave the Dar HaMabul, the generation of the deluge, because they were so immoral and they were sinning. God said, I'm going to give you a chance, I'm going to give you 120 years to redeem yourselves, to do penitence, to do tshuva. But the Ramban says that this is proof, very clear proof, that God doesn't hide anything, and that human being is culpable, and human being is responsible for his actions, and no human being is God. And the Makor Baruch says that even though Moshe Rabbeinu spent 40 days and 40 nights, he was still human. He was still regular. Marsha asks, why teach us this lesson within the framework of the Dor HaMabul? What's the connection to Moshe Rabbeinu? And he says, because the way that God showed his providence in the world, and that God intervenes in human affairs and worldly affairs, is when God separated, the earth was inundated with water, and God made dry land, V'serah hayabasha, that there could be a habitable earth. But when the people sinned, God said, I am retreating, so to speak. I'm going to conceal myself. And the waters came back to envelop the world. But Moshe Rabbeinu was the one, when he did the splitting of the sea, as a vehicle of Hashem, again, there was dry land. And that's the connection. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, even as a human being, reached such great heights that he was able to restore the hashgacha of God in the world. Rav Moshe Feinstein, somebody from our world, our generation, passed away in 1986, was so holy. Kol HaTorah Kula, Paisek HaDor, the Rabban Shel Kol Bnei HaGolah, the Rebbe of all the diaspora. Everybody that knew him says he was the paragon, the paradigm of humility, of greatness. You know that there's a story that there was an almana, a widow, who wanted to know every Erev Yom Kippur whether she is allowed to take her heart medicine. And she got a little compulsive about it because, I mean, after all, if it's 1 year it's permitted, why should the next year it not be permitted? Of course it's permitted the next year. As a matter of fact, the person's more aged now. But every single year, she would call Rav Moshe Feinstein on his phone, and Erev Yom Kippur is a very busy time for a Rav. I can attest to it to myself. It's a very busy time as a Rav, Erev Yom Kippur. Preparing the drushes, the davening, shilas. And Rav Moshe, the Rav of all of Klal Yisrael, can you imagine how many? And the woman called him, and he took the call and went through all the medicines with her. 1 year, she didn't call him. And she was staying by her daughter. And the daughter gets a phone call every occasion. She's all harried and she's all busy. And hello! You know, you're like, who's this bothering me on the phone now, right? Who's this pest? It's Moshe Feinstein. Well, what? It's like, you get a call from the White House. Or Moshe Feinstein traced down the woman to find out why she didn't call if she's okay. Was Moshe Feinstein born like that? There's a famous story that he had a Vilna Shas, very, very expensive book of the Talmud. He was sitting there studying. It was a very long time ago. They had inkwells. And there was a kid, maybe he was Down syndrome. Something was, developmentally disabled. And he was playing around near Rav Moshe. And accidentally he went ahead, or maybe intentionally went ahead, and took the inkwell and spilled it, and the Gemara was ruined. And what did Rav Moshe do? Instinctively, impulsively, he reached out to embrace the child, to hug the child. He didn't have to think about it. Most of us react. First we go, take a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out. I'm not going to lose it. I'm going to stay calm. Instinctively, impulsively, was he born like that? I heard from an intimate, from a family member of Moshe, it was like Mipi Hashmua, that he said about himself, that he was prone to getting angry, out of temper. But he worked on himself. The Chavetz Chaim was renowned for Machsoim Lefi, for not speaking Lashon Hara. The Chavetz Chaim, though, said about himself that he's the most sociable creature. He loved gossiping. He loved talking. But he worked on himself. That's what life is about. Kizer kol adam. This is what the human being is about. Says the Grodim Goin. And it's magnum opus, Evan Shleima. You want to know what the whole Torah is about? You want to know what religion is about? You want to know what Klal Yisrael is about? You want to know what the Torah is about? What Yiddishkeit is about? It's about one thing. Lasake midos bavad. Is to engage in self-perfection and becoming a better person. But holiness, once you work on achieving it, what is holiness? There was a very holy man. We spoke about the generations from Adam to Noach and then Noach to Avram. And we said there was a big problem, a severe, critical problem. Because decadence and immorality, emptiness. But 7 generations removed from Adam, and 7 is, of course, a special number of 7 Yimei, Shiva Yimei Shabbat, the 7 continents, 7 musical notes. 7 denotes something very, very special. 7 generations from Adam Arishon was Chanoich. And 7 generations from Avram was Moshe Rabbeinu. Chanoich, says the Torah, was so holy and so exceptional and so unique that Chanoch was Einenu. Rabban Shalom took him from this terrestrial world. And he's no longer, because he was so holy. But there's a problem here. Because according to Yiddishkeit, holiness is not about hibernating. It's not about being in the Himalayas. It's not about retreating. Holiness is about engaging with the world and trying to help others. Says the Chasam Sofer. Einenu, we know what it means, Einenu? It means there was nothing left of him. He had no teachings in the world left. He had no Talmidim because he didn't try to impact the world. And that was what made Avram Avinu exceptionally unique. Because Avram Avinu could have maybe become even greater and holier, but he realized that true holiness is measured not by engaging in the self, but in reaching out to others and assisting others in helping change them and bringing them to holiness. As a matter of fact, Chanoch, interestingly enough, Rabbi Gavriel Ashtovitzer says, the Heilige Rabbi Ashtovitzer Rebbe says, that Chanoch was a shoemaker. Zohar says he was a shoemaker. He says, why was he a shoemaker? Because he was so holy that he recognized the fact that when Cain killed Hevel, the earth was contaminated, it was impure. Because it was soaked with blood. And nobody was allowed to step on it barefoot. Because then they subject their soles of their feet to the tumah, to the contamination. That's why Chanoch would make shoes. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that the Zohar says that every tefirah, every stitch that Chanoch stitched in the shoe, he was miyachid shem kudsha baruch hu. He united God's name. Says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, how could he do that? You imagine you go to a pharmacist or you go to a car mechanic and he's fixing your car, and while he's fixing your car, he's saying, L'shem yuchol kudsha baruch hu, right? You'd say the guy's, off his rocker. You don't want him to do that. You want to make sure that, your engine is okay. If he's distracted, if he's in celestial heights, he's not going to do a good job. So it says Rav Sosalan, it's not ethical for him to be a shoemaker and to do this. He says, no, that's not what he was doing. What he was doing is that every tefirah, every stitch, he wanted to make sure was the best, the most fit, so that the recipients of the customer should feel that he got the best quality, the best product in the world. And that's what it means, miyachid shem yisparach. But despite all that, his holiness was compromised because he wasn't nefesh hashas b'choron, because he didn't make souls. The Zohar tells a story about a fellow who sinned in his thoughts. And a person that sins in his thoughts has to bring a korban olah. But there's a sliding scale. A poor person brings birds, and a rich man brings animals. This guy was a cheapo. He was very, very frugal and stingy and maybe cheap. And instead of bringing the animal, he brought birds. And the Kohen looks at him and he's coming in with a Lord and Taylor, suit, Pravda shoes. And they say, hey, get out of here. And he felt so dejected and so despondent. He goes home and they look, why are you so depressed? He says, because they threw me out. They said, well, what did you bring? He said, I brought birds. He said, you're not allowed to bring birds. You have to bring an animal. He says, really? It's just for having a thought, I have to bring an animal? He says, then how much more so if I actually did the sin? What would I have to bring? Oy vey, ochen vey. And he said, I'm changing my life around. He was a big businessman, a wealthy guy. The whole entire night, from then on, he spent learning Torah. And he became known, says the Zohar, as Yehuda Acher, as the other Yehuda, because he changed his life around. We could do it too. We could change, but a change is in small steps. You don't have to change overnight. You don't have to make quantum leaps. But to take baby steps and recognize I have a character trait that I could work on. 1 hour today, 2 hours tomorrow, 3 hours the next day. And slowly but surely, you can become a Rebbe Kiva. It's never too late. You become a mayor. You become Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. You become Rabbi Yochanan Zaka. You become a Hillel. You can become a Moshe Rabbeinu according to Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. Because B'Shagam Hu Basar, he's also flesh and blood. Lo Yod and Ruchi, don't judge and don't think I put my spirit in the human being. I didn't. Every human being was created with flesh and blood, but they achieved, as the Rambam says, Ba'avodah with their hard work, because as the Mishnah ends, Lefum Sarah Agra. I have to tell you, in my role as the Rav of BJX, of Brooklyn Jewish Experience, I see every single day, Baruch Hashem, every single day, people, I am so nispoil. I am mamish awestruck. People that change around their lives. And it's not easy. Not easy. When I come into the room, they want to show me respect. I said, no, no, no. The other way around. You're the ones that deserve the respect. You're the ones that did such monumental, pivotal changes in your lives. Where a guy was fed for breakfast every day by his mother, bacon and eggs. Imagine what his cholesterol and triglycerides are like, right? And he gave up everything to take on a life of Torah, and it wasn't easy for him because he recognized the truth. Or somebody who grew up from and had a very bad experience, no fault of his own, and went away from Yiddishkeit, but says, I'm willing to give it another shot. And even though he could have a lot of cheap pleasures in the world, he makes up that he's going to go for real fulfillment. That's amazing. So we're about to encounter the Moyed of Shavuos. Moyed really literally means an appointment. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe b'mimbar Sinai b'oil Moyed lemar, says the Heilige Lezhinsk or the Melech Lezhinsk, that God said b'mimbar Sinai, how is Torah supposed to be learned? B'oil Moyed, ensconced, enwrapped in Moyed. Moyed means joy. It means an appointment with God. It means happiness, because that's what Torah is supposed to be. So I bless us all, each and every one of us, myself included. We should have the schus of getting simcha out of Torah, happiness out of Torah, and B'ez Hashem achieving greatness in our lives and positively affecting those around us. Amen. Ken Yerotzo. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi Fingerer.
So thank you.
Very nice. We have our meet at 10 o'clock for all the men, whoever wants to stick around for that. That's the usual when you have where it is. Once again, tomorrow night for the ladies at the class, time out on Abramson. Next week, we have Eliyahu Bergstein right over here. Please come, bring your friends, spread the word. Sunday night, June 1st, I believe it is. Okay, the following week we're going to have Rabbi Mordechai Beth. The following week we're going to have Rabbi Official Chapters. We have a lot of great events coming up. So please,
Gilgal, which reincarnation, transmigration of the soul.
To all your contacts, the text messages, send it out. If you have any ways to help us for a little bit of sure, we'll be more than happy to take your advice. We have the rabbi's books over here, Judaism. How much are you going for?
$20.
It's only $20. So whoever wants, it's proofs about Judaism, right?
Yeah.
So please feel free to get a copy of that.
Sure, thank you.
Don't forget, visit ChazaqRadio.com. CHAZAQ radio.
You're not on
the air yet. If anyone has any connections with the radio waves, or anyone that owns the radio wave would love to be on air. To be all over New York City or over the world, whatever, I don't know how it works. Yeah, it costs a lot of money, maybe, but maybe someone owns it, and they'll just give it to us. Because if you go through the channels, many of them are just empty, you know?
See, apply to the federal, what's called the...
Please apply for us.
Ruben, you can do it, Ruben. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, it's not what you know, it's who you know. If we have any
What
connection,
coverage you looking for? The whole city?
as much as we can get, whatever, we'll start small. Do we have enough for a Kaddish? Anybody want to, Rabbi Moshe, you have Kaddish to say?